Right now, inside Newcastle United, a decision has just landed that could reshape Arsenal's entire midfield plan for the new season. Sandro Tonali, the Italian midfielder who has been one of Newcastle's most important players, has been made available for transfer. This is not a small story. Newcastle failed to finish in the top 5 of the Premier League last season, which means no Champions League football for them, and that has put real financial pressure on the club. Tonali himself wants to keep playing in Europe's top competition, and after helping Newcastle reach the round of 16 in the Champions League, only to be eliminated by Barcelona, he is reportedly ready for a new chapter. At the same moment, word has come through that Manchester United have stepped back from this race. They were interested, they had Tonali on their list for some time, but the price tag has reportedly become too much for them to swallow. Newcastle are said to be valuing their man at more than €100 million, which works out to roughly £86 million. For Arsenal, who have just ended a 20-year wait to win the Premier League, this is the kind of moment that can completely change a transfer window. Let us be very clear about what is at stake here. Arsenal already have a strong midfield on paper. Declan Rice, Miles Lewis-Skelly, Christian Norgard, Martin Zubimendi and Mikel Merino are all part of Mikel Arteta's options in that area of the pitch. But Merino missed a large chunk of last season with a foot injury, and that is the kind of absence that can derail a title defence if it happens again. If Arsenal misjudge this moment, if they hesitate while Manchester City or another club moves quickly, they risk losing access to a top-level midfielder who is reportedly already available and who has already shown interest in a move to North London during the January window. On the other side, if Arsenal get this right, they could be adding a Champions League proven midfielder at a moment when their direct domestic rival has just pulled out of the race. That is the kind of opportunity that does not come around often. Before we go further into this, if you want this level of detail on every twist of Arsenal's summer business, make sure you are subscribed to this channel. We go deeper than the headlines, we separate confirmed information from speculation, and we will be tracking every single one of these stories as they develop. Now let's break down exactly what is happening piece by piece. The Tonali situation. Let's start with the facts that are solid. Sandro Tonali currently plays for Newcastle United. That has not changed. What has changed is his availability. Newcastle's failure to qualify for the Champions League last season has created what is being described as financial strain, and Italian outlet TuttoMercatoWeb has reported that the club has now made him available for transfer. That is a significant shift from where things stood even a few months ago. Now here is where we need to separate fact from rumour, because there are several layers to this story. The first layer is Manchester United's interest. According to widely respected transfer reporter Fabrizio Romano, Manchester United have been interested in Tonali for some time, and he has been on their shortlist. However, Romano's most recent information is that Manchester United are not proceeding with a move at this stage. His exact words were that the intention of Manchester United is not to proceed, and that they now believe the player is too expensive. This is being presented as Manchester United's current stance, not as something Arsenal have said or commented on. The second layer is Arsenal's involvement, and this is where things get interesting for our channel. It has been reported that Tonali's representatives made contact with Arsenal's sporting director, Andrea Berta, to gauge interest from the North London club. This is being framed as the players' camp reaching out, which tells you something about where Tonali himself might want to go next. Romano has gone further, saying that Arsenal have made calls over recent days regarding Tonali, and that this puts them in the mix alongside other potential suitors. I want to stress, this is still firmly in rumour territory. There is no confirmed bid, no agreed fee, and no indication that a deal is close. What we do know for certain is that Tonali was a target for Arsenal during the January transfer window, and at that point nothing came of it. So this interest is not new. It has simply resurfaced now that Newcastle's financial situation has shifted and Manchester United have stepped back. There is also a third club in this picture. Romano has suggested that Tonali could be an option for Manchester City, though their current focus appears to be on Elliot Anderson, a player who is also reportedly being monitored by Manchester United. So you have a genuinely fluid situation, 3 major clubs circling, 1 player who wants Champions League football, and a selling club under pressure to do business. Romano's own assessment is that more clubs could yet join the race, and that the situation around Tonali could become very interesting as the summer progresses. From an analytical standpoint, here is what stands out to me. Arsenal's midfield already looks strong on paper, but the Merino injury situation last season is a reminder that depth matters enormously over a 40-plus game season when you are competing in the Premier League, the Champions League and domestic cups simultaneously. A player like Tonali, who has Champions League experience, who is 26 years old and who is reportedly already available, fits a profile that makes sense for a squad trying to compete on every front. But until there is a concrete bid or an agreed structure, this remains exactly what it is, a developing situation worth watching, not a confirmed transfer. Now let's move into the live transfer interest, and again I want to be precise about what is rumour and what is closer to confirmed. Morgan Rogers of Aston Villa and Eli Junior Kroupi of Bournemouth are both names Arsenal are reportedly interested in. Aston Villa are said to want £100 million for Rogers, while Bournemouth value Kroupi at more than £86 million. Both of these are described as expensive deals, and at this stage this is interest, not an agreement. Both players currently belong to their respective clubs, and there is no indication either club is under pressure to sell. Arsenal are also reportedly looking to add a midfielder and a full-back to the squad this summer, and this is where Ayoub Bouaddi's name becomes central. Bouaddi currently plays for Lille in France, and Arsenal have apparently been tracking him since 2025. What makes this situation feel more advanced than a typical rumour is the timeline. Andrea Berta is reported to have made contact with Bouaddi's representatives, and these conversations reportedly go back to the start of the year, not just the last few weeks. That suggests a level of long-term planning rather than a reactive last-minute approach. There is competition here too. Paris Saint-Germain are also reported to be interested in Bouaddi. However, because Arsenal are also looking for a midfielder who can operate in both a number 8 and a number 6 role, and because of how early Arsenal's interest reportedly began, there is a suggestion that Arsenal could move into a leading position for this deal relatively quickly. Again, this is interest and positioning, not a signed contract. Then there is Jeremy Monga, the 16-year-old from Leicester City. Arsenal are reported to be in talks over a transfer, with suggestions that any deal could cost somewhere in the region of £10 million to £15 million. Monga has already been a regular in Leicester's first-team setup across the last 2 seasons, which is notable for a player his age. This is described as Arsenal being highly appreciative of him, with talks underway to determine whether a move is possible. On the Paris Saint-Germain front, there is also interest in winger Bradley Barcola, who is entering the final 2 years of his contract there. He scored 13 goals in 49 appearances last season, and a move is said to be valued around £70 million. Liverpool have also been mentioned as interested parties. Paris Saint-Germain are not reported to want to sell, but it is suggested their position could shift if a serious enough offer arrives. So again, this is interest on Arsenal's part, competition from another major club, and a selling club that currently has no intention to sell. That is about as clearly rumour as it gets, and I want our viewers to treat it that way. Now let's turn to what is being said across social media. Beyond the core reporting, there has been a wave of additional commentary and reaction circulating, and I want to walk through each of these one by one, because together they fill in a lot of the texture around this story. The first piece of information concerns Ayoub Bouaddi directly. Speaking about his own future amid the growing interest from several clubs, Bouaddi has said that he is happy to know clubs are interested in him, but that right now his full focus is on the World Cup and that he and his teammates will give everything and do their best in that competition. He remains fully focused on international duty with Morocco, despite all the transfer speculation building up around him, and Arsenal are among the clubs credited with interest in the highly rated young midfielder. My take on this is fairly simple. This is exactly the kind of response you would expect from a young player being courted by multiple top clubs during a major international tournament. He is not closing the door on anything, but he is also not getting drawn into transfer talk while representing his country. If anything, performing well at the World Cup only strengthens his position and likely increases his value, which could work in either direction for Arsenal depending on how quickly they are willing to move. The second piece of information reinforces the Berta connection we already discussed. It has been stated that Arsenal's sporting director has already made inroads with Bouaddi's representatives, and that nobody should be surprised if Arsenal move into pole position for this deal swiftly. What I find significant here is the word swiftly. If Arsenal really have been building this relationship since the start of the year, as the broader reporting suggests, then they are not starting from zero. They have a head start over clubs that might only be reacting to his World Cup performances now. That earlier groundwork could be the difference if this turns into a genuine race with Paris Saint-Germain. The third piece of information is being treated as breaking news, claiming that Arsenal are closing in on an agreement with Leicester City for Jeremy Monga, with the deal expected to be worth around £10 million, and describing Arsenal as on the verge of winning the race for one of England's brightest young talents. I want to flag this clearly as still a developing situation rather than a done deal. It lines up with the broader reporting that talks are underway and that a fee in the region of £10 million to £15 million has been suggested. The word closing in tells you this is advanced, but until there is official confirmation from the clubs themselves, this should be treated as strong interest progressing toward an agreement, not a completed transfer. The fourth piece of information is about Matheus Fernandes, and this one adds a new layer to what we already knew. It states that Arsenal have cooled their interest in the West Ham midfielder, with Arsenal feeling that West Ham's £80 million valuation was too high, and it claims that the 21-year-old now looks set to join Manchester United instead. This fits perfectly with what we already established, that the price tag was the sticking point for Arsenal. What it adds is a claimed destination for Fernandes, suggesting he could end up at Manchester United instead. I want to be careful here because this part about Manchester United is presented as a separate claim and should be treated as a rumour about his next destination rather than something Arsenal themselves have confirmed. What we can say with more confidence is that Arsenal's side of this story, the cooling of interest due to valuation, lines up with the broader picture. The fifth piece of information concerns Christos Tzolis. The sentiment being expressed is one of optimism, suggesting that if Tzolis joins Arsenal this summer, there is every reason to feel positive about this potential addition to the attack. There is also a mention that the scout credited with identifying Ivica Kvaratskhelia has also been the one scouting Tzolis. This is firmly in early speculation territory. There is no fee mentioned, no indication of talks, simply a name being connected to Arsenal alongside a scouting pedigree that is being used to build excitement. I would treat this as one of the more speculative names on the list right now, something to monitor rather than something with real substance behind it yet. The sixth piece of information shifts focus to Folarin Balogun, who is currently with Monaco. It has been pointed out that Arsenal could benefit financially this summer from Balogun's performances for the United States at the World Cup, where he scored twice in a 4-1 win over Paraguay, further boosting his profile ahead of a potential move away from Monaco. Crucially, Arsenal are entitled to a 17.5% sell-on clause, meaning any future transfer involving Balogun could generate additional funds for Arsenal's summer plans. This is a really important detail for understanding how Arsenal might actually fund some of the bigger moves we have discussed. A sell-on clause of 17.5% is substantial. If Balogun's World Cup form increases his market value and leads to a big money move away from Monaco, Arsenal stand to receive a meaningful cash injection without having sold a current player from their own squad. Given the price tags being thrown around for players like Morgan Rogers, Eli Junior Kroupi and Bradley Barcola, every additional source of funding matters, and this clause could quietly become more relevant than people initially realise. The seventh piece of information goes back to the midfield conversation and adds real clarity to Arteta's thinking. It is reported that Arteta wants a four-man midfield rotation for next season, built around Declan Rice, Martin Zubimendi, Miles Lewis-Skelly and one new signing. This is, in my view, one of the most telling details in this entire story. It tells us that regardless of how the Tonali situation, the Bouaddi pursuit, or the Matheus Fernandes situation plays out, Arteta has a defined structural plan. 3 of the 4 spots already appear to be set with Rice, Zubimendi and Lewis-Skelly. The 4th spot is described as a new signing, which means whoever Arsenal bring in this summer for midfield, whether that ends up being Tonali, Bouaddi or someone else entirely, is being lined up to slot directly into a defined rotational role rather than simply adding to an already crowded group. That is useful context for understanding why Arsenal might be willing to move on more than one midfield target depending on how each situation develops. The 8th piece of information takes us away from transfers and into the emotional side of the Champions League final. Eberechi Eze, reflecting on missing a penalty in that final and on learning from Bukayo Saka and Marcus Rashford afterward, described how even before speaking with them, he had already seen how top players handle these moments. His message was about stepping up, doing what you have to do, and accepting that if you miss, and if you score, you score. He described it as part of the journey, said he has taken penalties for a long time, and that this is simply part of growing and improving. He called the season one full of ups and downs, with many things to overcome, but ultimately an enjoyable one that he wants to experience every year, with a clear focus on continuing to improve and grow. From an analytical perspective, this tells us 2 things. First, it confirms that Eze was directly involved in that Champions League final, including taking a penalty that did not go in. Second, the tone of his reflection, calmness, acceptance and a forward-looking mindset suggests a player who is mentally prepared to move past a difficult moment rather than be defined by it. For a squad heading into another season competing on multiple fronts, having players who can process setbacks this way matters more than people often realise. The 9th and final piece of information concerns Bukayo Saka, and it is a fitness update relevant to the World Cup. The claim is that Saka currently cannot start and finish matches for England due to an Achilles issue that he was managing throughout last season. This is significant for 2 reasons. First, it confirms that Saka carried a physical issue through an entire domestic season that included a Premier League title win and a Champions League final appearance. Second, the fact that this is still being managed during the World Cup suggests it is not fully resolved. For Arsenal specifically, this is worth filing away. A key attacking player managing an Achilles concern across a long, multi-competition season is exactly the kind of situation that makes squad depth in attacking areas, the kind of depth that names like Morgan Rogers, Eli Junior Kroupi or Bradley Barcola could provide, feel less like luxury additions and more like necessary planning for a club trying to sustain success across 4 competitions. Closing thoughts. So where does all of this leave us? Arsenal are coming off the most successful domestic season in over 2 decades, but one that ended in heartbreak in 2 cup finals. The squad rebuild already underway shows a club thinking long-term, with agreements already in place for players who will not arrive for months or even years. At the same time, there is a long list of live interest spanning midfield, attack and full-back positions, with price tags ranging from around £10 million for a 16-year-old prospect all the way up to £100 million for an established Premier League winger. The Tonali situation we opened with remains the most fluid of all of these stories. A player who wants Champions League football, a selling club under financial pressure, one major rival stepping back, and Arsenal's name now firmly in the conversation. Nothing is confirmed, but the pieces are moving in a way that is genuinely worth watching closely over the coming weeks. That is everything for this breakdown. If you found this useful, the best way to make sure you do not miss the next update is to subscribe and turn on notifications, because these situations, especially the midfield picture, could shift quickly. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next one.